Hey everyone, welcome to the very first Elevate Your Energy session. This is a summer session that I'm holding of virtual classes, and the intention of these classes is to share with you what I'm personally learning in my own life and that I will eventually turn into a curriculum anyway. But these are my notes, these are my current learnings, current experiences, and I might give you a little insight depending on the class of why I'm learning this and how I'm applying it. But for the most part, I really just want to teach things that may sound complicated, but can be super practical and can be applied into our lives on a daily basis, no matter where you're starting from, no matter where you are in your self development journey. This is for you. As long as you're willing, as long as you are excited and you have a drive within you to create change and to cultivate a particular reality on your terms, I guarantee you that these classes are for you. So today's class is the fear, tension, and pain cycle and how to break that cycle. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. I just want to introduce myself. If you're finding this or you've signed up for this and you have no idea who I am, my name is Sabrina. I am a mindfulness teacher, a meditation instructor, and an intuitive healer. So you can find me either leading meditations, teaching people how to reduce stress in their life, or channeling a message from the divine about something that someone out there needs to hear. And these sessions are probably going to be a little bit of all that I do, just because this one's mine and I'm not creating it for anyone but me. So, for the most part, there will be a lot of channeled messages flowing through me. I'll also be checking out my notes on the computer behind this laptop. So, if my eyesight is a little off and I'm not looking at the camera, it's because I'm looking at my notes because I am super passionate about all the things that I learn. And to be a great teacher is to be a scholar first, is to be a forever student. And the best way to know that I'm learning or I'm retaining what I've learned, or I'm retaining what I've studied, is to be able to teach it and to teach it in simple terms and to make sure it's clear and understandable to anyone who is tuning in and interested in the topic. And so that's honestly the little selfish reason why I've created the Elevate Your Energy project. It's to make sure that I'm keeping myself accountable for everything that I'm learning, but I'm also sharing this with people who are just interested in learning too. Because if I'm this interested and excited about learning and applying things to my life and seeing the changes that it can make, I know I can't be alone in that. So if you're tuning into this, thank you. I really appreciate your time and I appreciate you trusting me to be your guide inward today. So before we begin, we're just going to take a couple deep breaths together. I'm going to guide you very shortly, a couple minutes, to just close out some mental tabs and to transition from whatever you were doing to now being, to being here, to being present, and to being open so that you can receive any and all messages that need to come through me and find you today. So you can keep your eyes open if you like, or you can close them. But I do want you to just relax into your body. Relax your jaw, the muscles in your cheeks and your face. And if you don't close your eyes, you can just relax them down a little bit and point your gaze toward the tip of your nose. Nothing in particular, just relaxing your eyelids. I invite you to drop your shoulders away from your ears while keeping a proper posture if you can. Back nice and straight, not too rigid. And whatever's comfortable for your lower body, you can have your feet grounded on the floor beneath you, cross legged, a little bit of both, like I'm doing. And just settling into your seat. In your own time and at your own pace, I invite you to take a deep inhale through the nose and a long exhale through the nose. And as you'll learn in today's session, that is a very particular practice in inviting calm into your body. Letting your body know that it can turn off the autopilot for breathing, even for just a few breath cycles. And with each exhale, gently close any open tabs that may be floating around in your mind. What you have to do later, what you didn't finish before, any distracting thoughts or stories that are pulling you in different directions. Just close out that tab. And if you find that there are a couple stubborn tabs that don't want to close, you can gently remind yourself that you can think them later, at a time where you can give it your proper attention. In a moment, I'll chime the bell 3 times, and with each one, follow the sound until you can't anymore. And it will deliver you to the present moment. Welcome to the present moment. Taking the time to gently open your eyes if you had them closed, or widen your gaze. And bring your attention to how your body's feeling right now. And see if you can rate that. It doesn't have to be a number. Maybe it can just be a label of how it feels. Maybe it's calm, maybe it's still. Maybe there's still a little movement that has to happen. However you are showing up in this moment is perfectly, exactly, it's more than okay. It's exactly where you need to be. And we'll talk more about that as this session goes on. So my name is Sabrina. I am going to be your instructor inward today. And the focus of today's class is on the fear, tension, and pain cycle and how to break that cycle. So no matter where you are in your self-development journey, no matter where you are in understanding your inner world, which is your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your physical sensations, no matter where you are, you can start here today. No matter what you're going through and no matter what circumstances may have been handed to you or dealt to you, you are in the perfect place to start. Whether you are in immense pain or you're really not that stressed out. These are very practical tools that I'm going to offer you today that even if you don't use them at this moment, they will come in handy. And you are already equipped to use them. All the things that I teach are things that I like to remind my students, if they resonate with you, it's because I'm just reminding you of what you already know. This is innate wisdom that's already inside of you. And as I said earlier, I am a channeler. So any messages that are coming through me, they're not mine. I'm just the vessel in which the spirit or the divine uses to get that message out to anyone who's listening and vibrating on this frequency with me. So if something resonates, it's because you already know it's your truth. And that message that you heard that really felt like, wow, I think she was talking to me. It's because I was. And it's because you needed a reminder of your personal power. So I hope that you get a little bit of that, maybe a lot of that today. And I want you to set your own intention. I offer you the intention of the class, which is to break the cycle of fear, tension, and pain. And we'll talk about each of those and then practical ways to break that cycle. But your intention is something that you anchor back into. So a simple intention you can choose today is I intend to be open and receive what I'm meant to receive. It could be as simple as that. And by remaining open or intending to remain open, you're allowing yourself space to receive what you need to hear. Anything that does not resonate with you, leave it. It's not meant for you, and that's okay. But the intention of this series is to get as much information out there to as many people as possible because I know this stuff is helpful because we all experience fear and tension and pain. And if I can help you redefine your relationship with any of these three, then I'm very excited to do so. So let's get started. To start, I would like to give you a little glimpse into my life and why it is that I'm actually studying this. So at the time of this recording, I'm 12 weeks pregnant. And this was one of the most important things for me when starting my family was the mindset around that. There's a lot of narratives about fear of the pain of childbirth, the pain of pregnancy, and there's just so many negative connotations around all of that. And so the fear, tension, pain cycle is actually something that if you look it up on YouTube or Google, there's a lot of it based around childbirth because that's kind of where it originated. It originated by a doctor in the 30s who was observing women going through labor and was astonished to find that there were some of them that were not in any pain at all. Now, please hear me out when I say this is not like a magical class to relieve you of pain. That's not the case. But I do believe it's possible to redefine your pain or your relationship to pain in such a way where it can absolutely be manageable. Because there are things outside of us that we cannot control. And so what we're going to be focusing on is what's going on the inside and what we can control. So I chose to start with this one because this was so monumental for me to learn just in the few weeks, in the first month or so of finding out that I was pregnant. It was really important because mindset and energy is everything. I know that from my work, but I also know as the home of my baby, the very first home, um, they're not just receiving nourishment from me and nutrients, they're receiving my energy. And it's important that I am intentional about the energy that I'm giving and receiving, and also the emotional states. There are going to be times, as I've been told, that hormones are going to take over. Um, but I also live by the belief that if it's coming from within me, it cannot be stronger than me. And you may hear me say that often throughout, not just this class, but this series. If it's coming from within you, it cannot be stronger than you. It's an experience happening within you, and you are bigger than the experiences happening within you. So it was important for me to get my mind right and redefine fear and pain and tension and get a hold of how I can contribute to this narrative, how I can change it up so it doesn't have to be the horror story that you see in movies and television shows, which is a whole other thing that feeds into our fear, right? The media that we consume, or the lack thereof, because there's positive media out there as well, but if it's not easily accessible or pumped into your face as quickly, chances are we gravitate more naturally to the negative. And so that's the main reason why I chose this topic. There's a life growing inside of me, and to me, that is like the most serious topic, the most serious reason to get real about my emotional state and to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to remain a high vibrational being. And so, whether you are a mother or plan to be or never plan to be, whether you're a woman or not, it doesn't matter. You have fear and tension and pain in your life. And I want to help you break that cycle in any way that I possibly can. And the number one way to make any change in our life is to first observe and become aware of what is. So, before I get too far into that, let me read you a little bit, just an introduction of some of the notes that I've been taking on studying this cycle. So, the fear, tension, pain cycle is a cycle of thought, sensation, and reaction occurring in a loop connected to one another. When one increases, they all increase, which is also to say that when one decreases, they all decrease. Now, recognize that power right there. If they're all connected, then just by you tensing up your shoulders in a stressful situation, your tension goes up, your fear increases, and then inevitably so does your pain. And then it just keeps going in a loop. And then there's the other side of the coin. Maybe if you drop your shoulders and you release that tension, maybe a little bit of that fear releases too. And maybe the pain subsides a bit, even for a moment. So before jumping into the how of breaking the cycle and ultimately decreasing the fear, tension, and pain being experienced in your body, it's truly significant for you to understand how this cycle works. Because, like I said, everything starts with awareness. So let's start with fear. Fear is of the mind. Now, this is not to say you're making it up, although sometimes we do that. But fear begins in the mind. And what I mean by that is it starts as a thought, it starts as a belief, it starts as a worry, an anxiety, an agitation, an anticipation of something to come. Or maybe you might be stuck on something that actually happened to you in real life. It already happened. It was very real. It was very scary. It was very painful, but it happened in the past. And so you're holding on to it because you're scared it's going to happen again. That's fear. Reliving something that's already happened to, quote, prepare yourself in case it happens again, right? Fear is of the mind. It begins in the mind. And that's not to say that it doesn't have very visceral, very physical reactions throughout the body, which I'll go into in a moment, but it's important to understand that. And I'll talk a little more about how the body is a vehicle. But in order for the body to be driven as a vehicle, it needs a driver. The mind is that driver, okay? So all things, not just fear, all things start in the mind, Okay, so keep that at your forefront. These narratives create more fear and division from the mind and body. And what I mean by that is, as we'll talk about intention, the narratives, let me break that down a little bit more. When I say the word narratives, I'm talking about the stories that we create around our emotional states. So, for instance, anxiety. The very simplest story for anxiety is I am an anxious person. Now that's your story. And once that story is repeated enough times in your head, that becomes your truth. And that truth becomes a belief system. And when that belief system, like something like the sky is blue, something you don't even have to think about anymore because it's a belief. It's not an opinion to you, it's become a fact. I am an anxious person. Just as the sky is blue, I am an anxious person. When a belief gets so embedded that it creates a system of beliefs around that, that is now the way that you perceive your life. You perceive your life through the lens of whatever the belief is. In this case, it's I am an anxious person, right? So as a result of that narrative, you are going to have corresponding physical sensations of anxiety. Now, tension is of the body, just as fear is of the mind, tension is of the body. Another way to say that is our emotions show up in physical sensations. So the response to fear originates in the mind, the response to fear shows up in the body. The narrative, I am an anxious person, shows up in the body as tension. Maybe your heart starts to beat really fast. Maybe you start to tense up in your shoulders. Your body constricts and maybe you go forward, kind of like into fetal position. Maybe you clench your fists. One of the things I noticed about my anxiety over the years is my nails go right into my hands. If I'm not thinking about it, I can be like this for a really long time. And when I finally tune into my body, I've got marks over here, right? So that's an emotional response. That's the way that our emotions communicate with us. They do so through physical sensation. So tension is of the body. Now, if we have a story about who we are, connected to that story is a set of physical sensations. There is a very big difference between experiencing anxiety and claiming anxiety as your identity. Because if we experience anxiety, it will be fleeting. And maybe it comes and goes more often for some. But if it's your identity, it doesn't go anywhere. It stays with you. And the longer that it stays with you, the more time those physical sensations have to practice being in your body. And anything surrounding, that's not the word I'm thinking of, anything related to fear, any emotional state related to fear, is what is known as survival emotions. I don't like to call them negative because then, we're on a whole judgmental tangent, right? Which technically they're on like the lower spectrum of emotions, but that's a whole other discussion. So for the purpose of this class, I'm going to call them survival emotions. So that's fear, anger, anxiety, frustration, stress. These are things that create tension and urgency in our body, just like survival. Like, I gotta survive, I gotta get through this, and we gotta get stuck in those lower vibrational emotional states. So now we have the narratives, the stories, the beliefs that are going on in our mind, and each of these have corresponding emotional responses in the body, and that's tension. So tension's commonly experienced as constriction, tightening like of the body, of usually I go for the shoulders, but it can be as simple as the jaw or your tongue stuck to the roof of your mouth. It could be tightening your glutes, your buttocks. It could be clenching your toes, grinding your teeth. It shows up differently for everyone, but gripping, constriction, closed off, that's a good way to think about tension. It's a physical response to fear. And the sensations that we cause consciously or unconsciously. Because if sometimes we do it consciously, we're just like, I'm so mad, and we ball up our fists, right? Purposely. Other times, we're in such an emotional state that we're so stuck in the story and we're playing it over and over and over and over that we completely forget that we have a body. And as I said earlier, the body is a vehicle of the mind. But if we're not paying attention and if we're moving on autopilot, then the body becomes a victim of the urges and the impulses and the emotional reactions of the mind, right? So go back to those stories, those narratives that you've created in your head. I am this. Instead of I have anxiety, I experience anxiety, I have stress, I experience fear. Something as simple and as strong as I am fearful. I am anxious. I am angry. These words have such power because I am equals identity. And the more you identify with something, the more familiar it gets staying with you. And that's when cycles and patterns of behavior begin to show themselves. Because if it is an I am statement and it's something that you identify, then chances are you're going to continuously identify with it anytime something comes up and gives you the opportunity to identify with it. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't have choices, and that goes back to conscious and unconscious. It doesn't mean we don't have choices, but it unconsciously begins to happen if we've chosen it so many times over and over again, if we've replayed this thought, this narrative, this fear in our mind over and over again. As we're replaying it, our body's reliving it because our body doesn't understand past, present, future. It just knows you're thinking about this, it's kicked off an emotion, and I'm responding to you. So you can relive the worst day of your life every single day for years and years to come. Your body will just believe that you're still there. It doesn't understand that time has passed. It doesn't understand time, really. So it's important to understand conscious and unconscious. Throughout this whole thing, I may say things that might trigger you, but please understand this is not a place of judgment at all. In fact, I'm really going to encourage that you let go of judgment and you practice non-judgment and just observe what's happening. If you identify as an anxious person, okay, start there. It's not good or bad. In fact, there's really not much room for good or bad because then that's a whole other story, right? And then we're going to judge ourselves for being good or bad, and there's going to be emotional reactions to that. So try your best to just be aware, just observe, and drop judgment. It'll come. You're going to judge yourself because you're human, and that's the most natural thing that we do. Continue to come back to it, to notice it and let it go. So, thank goodness I have a writing here, because otherwise I really would go on a tangent. Okay. So sensations we cause consciously or unconsciously within the body that intensify pain that is already being experienced. So now let's move on to pain. Pain is of the mind body. So there is the mind, there is the body, and then there's the relationship between the two. Pain is of both of those. It shows up in both of them. It's experienced in a multitude of ways, from physical, emotional, mental, and so on, recognized through descriptive labels such as discomfort, intense sensations, inconvenience, unpleasantness, otherwise known as what we don't want happening. So before I continue with that, because pain can truly be unpacked, what we don't want can often truly get in the way of what's already happening. For instance, I use the word inconvenient, so I want to use something. I'll share an example from my pregnancy, but I want to use something that's like way more universal, like traffic, or stubbing your toe when you're on your way out to something. That's inconvenient. This is not something that you wanted to happen. The more that we focus on, oh, why is this happening? I'm on my way somewhere. The more we're in the narrative, right? We're creating a story of what should, right? Let's keep a note of that word. The more we create a narrative around what shouldn't be happening versus what should be happening. And the shouldn't is what is happening. The should is not happening. It's something we wish could happen, right? So this is wasted energy here. So we're focusing and creating a story about what shouldn't be happening and how we're late and how this is, it's a snowball effect of thinking. And while we're thinking, there's stuff going on with our body that we may or may not be paying attention to, like your poor toe when you stubbed it. I will speak for myself. I have definitely gotten angry at objects because I've walked into them. It doesn't make much sense, but it's true. And so when we think about our reaction to things, which we'll talk about reaction and response in a few moments, when we think about our reaction to things, they're immediate and they're emotional. And it's very like, why is this happening? Inconvenient, unpleasant. I don't like this. I don't want this to be happening. Now, there's a difference between recognizing that you don't want something to happen and recognizing that it's inconvenient and unpleasant and even uncomfortable. I want to try and stay away from the word painful, but uncomfortable. And then there's the other side of that, where you're wishing it were different. And there's such a fine line between those two. And I really want to bring attention to it because the more you resist what's happening, the more you increase your tension, the more you increase the tension in your body, which ultimately will increase the pain in your body. And the entire cycle begins to repeat itself. And now fear doesn't always come in the form of like being fearful, afraid, scared. I want you to consider fear as one of those survival emotions, just like a blanket word for the survival emotions: anxiety, frustration, worrisome, anticipation. And anticipation can be a good thing, but sometimes we anticipate the worst happening, right? So that's what I mean with that one. So when I say fear, I want you to consider that as a blanket statement for all of the survival emotional states, the lower vibrational ones. Anger, the ones that build on each other and they're not getting you closer to feeling better. So you'll know exactly what they are with that description. And so if you're focusing on what you don't want and what you wish would change and what you wish was different, you're resisting what is. And as annoying and cliche as this saying is, what you resist persists. It doesn't go away just because you don't like it. In fact, your tension, your fear, your pain are going to increase because you're not willing to accept what is. You're focused on the narrative, fear. You're focused on the story of what you want to happen, of what should have happened, of how things could have been going if this happened, right? We do it all the time. It's not an easy habit to break, but it's a wonderful habit to become aware of. And that's where we always want to start, okay? We always want to start with observation. So, pain can be a sign that something is wrong. Other times, it could be a sign of a normal transitional experience. And resisting these sensations causes more tension, which increases your level of fear, ultimately making the pain worse. So, I'll give an example of pain that is a normal transitional experience. Giving birth. And even before giving birth, the expansion of my body, the changing that's happening. This has been a wonderful opportunity to redefine pain for me, because when you focus on what you don't want, everything's painful, when you focus on not wanting to get up and pee 3 times in the middle of the night, That's annoying, that's inconvenient, and that can absolutely be classified as painful. And then there's the actual giving birth, right? And if you're not mentally prepared for that physical experience, I'll call it, I got to be very mindful of my words here. I know my baby's listening. If you're not prepared for that physical experience, then there are going to be narratives attached to it. If you have not prepared for this set of sensations, this idea of pain, and welcoming it, then your normal human reaction is going to be to resist it, but it has to happen. And so I believe that is why it's so powerful to work on that stuff, before you get pregnant and even throughout your pregnancy. So then when we get to the point of like, okay, this is happening, I'm going to do my best to tune into what's happening and not resist it. Instead of, oh my God, this pain is so bad, like, and rather than judging it, rather than putting my attention on or creating narratives around or investing my energy in what I don't want to be happening, instead I can choose not to create a narrative at all. And I can choose to just tune in. This is happening. What can I do about it? This is happening. This is my experience. This is normal. My body is contracting the way that it needs to. And I'm listening. I'm not resisting it, because what I resist persists. So the more that I would resist the normal sensations of childbirth, the more tense my body would get. The more tense my body would get, the more fear I would have bringing my child into this world. And the more fear I have, ultimately, the more painful it is for me and maybe even my baby. And maybe that's when things deviate and don't go according to plan. Now, this is not to say that that all childbirth could be easy and painless. Every single person's body and experience is completely unique. And that's one of the wonderful things that I'm learning about this. But I know for me that strengthening my mindset is key. And if I can redefine my relationship with pain now, and I can tune into discomforts instead of labeling them what I don't want, recognizing that, hey, they're here anyway, how can I welcome them? How can I choose to allow rather than resist? How can I choose to relax into what's happening rather than tensing up and fighting it? Because it's going with what is, it's going with the flow of what is. And it helps create less tension in my body and hopefully in my experience. So that's another little bit of an insight of why I chose this topic for today. Okay, so now let's move on to the solutions and practices of how to break the cycle. So this is like the nitty-gritty, the bread and butter. All right, so we're gonna go through each section, first fear, then tension, then pain. And I'll offer some insights and some practices that not only have I been researching, but I've also learned and applied in my own life. And I gotta tell you, it's really working. One thing I will say though, when we get to pain, there will not be a lot of practices. There will be more insightful questions, because the thing with pain is it's really rooted in your belief system. And that is not something that I could cover in a free class, I could tell you that. That's something that has it has a lot to do with what you believe, the way you perceive the world. And that's deep rooted stuff. So that's not something that I can offer without knowing who you are and working with you personally. But I do have some questions, some self-discovery questions that I want to share, which could be a great starting point for you. So although we won't go too deep into pain, I'm going to go deep enough into fear and tension. And those are the two things that you can ground into the body and get into the present moment and help yourself get through the worst of the worst. pain is a bigger monster, and it's something that you personally have to be ready and willing to attack. As I've learned, not everyone um, wants to or is willing to do the work to redefine their relationship with pain. There are plenty of people that would rather recognize there is pain and then just get a physical solution, a medication solution for it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially if you're living with something like chronic pain. So, no judgment here, but I do want to like recognize my boundaries on this topic. And so, just wanted to give you guys a heads up. That's what I'm going to be leaving you with. So, let's start with fear. Fear in the mind kicks off the fight, flight, or freeze response in the body. There's a chemical reaction as well as a physical reaction that shows up in your body once your mind has recognized, decided on, or understood a circumstance as fear. And remember, fear is that blanket statement, right, of all of the emotional survival states of being. So, stress hormones are sent through your body to prepare to get you out of the fearful situation, which truly is a wonderful evolutionary tool. The issue is humans are the only animals that continue to live in their stressful states. Think about that. Animals in the wild, when there's stress coursing through their veins, it's because there's a predator after them, right? And they just need to get away. And so their stress hormones are coursing through their body, helping them, slowing down digestion. We don't need to digest anything right now. Like all of the unnecessary systems in our body just shut down, and all of the blood and all of the focus and all of the energy goes to getting you safe. But once those animals are safe, their body switches on the parasympathetic, the PNS. That's the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the stress hormones. And we'll call the calming hormones. And it's just turning off that stress and just letting your body know, like, all right, we're chill now. And now it's turning back on those other systems that needed to work properly. You're no longer in stress, in survival mode. But humans, we have the ability to keep ourselves in survival mode continuously. And we may not even realize we're doing it. And we do this by rethinking or ruminating or assuming or anticipating, worrying about things that may happen or things that have already happened, and now we're scared that they may happen again in the future. So if we're in survival mode, we're either living in the past or some future that we're predicting may or may not happen. That's a lot of wasted energy. A lot of wasted energy. And when you're in survival mode, there are narratives that keep us in there. And as a result of those narratives, there is physical and chemical and emotional responses coursing through the body. Now, over time, our body was not meant to stay in stress. We were not meant to stay in survival mode. So if you're constantly reliving these stories and you're constantly experiencing this stress, it's going to weigh on those systems that can naturally work. It's going to weigh on them, and it's going to be harder for your body to naturally take care of you because it's constantly told that it's not safe and it needs to struggle to survive. So our stress response doesn't turn off, and we perpetually live in a state of survival emotions. So here are some practices you can start once fear has set in to try and break the cycle and turn your PNS on and turning off the stress hormones and ultimately calming down your body. So I have 5 examples here, 5 practices that are so simple. You just have to remember to do them, okay? They're very simple, but you have to remember to do it. And often. I want to be very clear. This is not something you do once and you're like, okay, I'm good. We're breaking a cycle here. And this cycle may be really embedded in you, like years, maybe decades. Again, really want to stress this is a zero judgment zone, okay? We're not judging the way we get stressed, what stresses us out, why we're stressed, how we react to it. We are just observing what is. And this is a wonderful opportunity for you to observe your relationship with stress or fear or tension in your body. Because once you observe it, you have a choice, you have a say in the matter, okay? So, number one, ground into your body and the sensations being experienced. Observe them. Let go of your opinions about what's happening and get clear on what is actually happening. A very simple example of this is stubbing your toe. Oh, this is the worst. That's an opinion. And in the grand scheme of things, when we zoom out, it's an unnecessary one because it's not really getting you anywhere. It's just reiterating that you don't want this to be happening, right? But your opinions don't matter in the reality of what is happening. So, what is happening? I stubbed my toe. It hurts. That's fact, right? So, I'm using a very minute example, but there are grand examples. And I want to leave that to your imagination, and I want you to really pay attention to the way that you speak to yourself when you're fearful, or the way that you speak to yourself when you're in pain. Because your response, the words, the narratives that are going on inside of your head, that also might be a pattern. Pay attention to it and try to omit any opinions. It's not something that it's going to happen overnight, and I'm not even saying opinions are bad, but they're just not going to help you. They're not going to help you. What's going to help you is getting clear on what's actually happening. Grounding into the body, not your opinion about the experience, but about what is occurring in this present moment. Number two, connect with your breath for 10 cycles as a way of grounding. So one cycle of breath is a deep inhale and a long exhale. I'm not talking these quick ones, just we're not doing that. I'm talking like a deep doing that 10 times without urgency, without rush. And a little pro tip to help your parasympathetic nervous system turn on, try to keep your exhale a few seconds longer than your inhale, like 3-4 seconds, okay? This simple practice will allow for that switch from your stress hormones to the PNS system to turn on and reduce the hormones being pumped through your body, causing you to react, okay? It's gonna help you physically and chemically calm down. Number three, recognize the areas you are gripping, clenching, tightening in the body and release them. Tie this in with your exhale as a reminder to let go of each breath. That's what I love about breath cycles. Number one, they are always in the present moment. Always in the present moment. Number two, it is the most perfect example of receive and release. In order to get more, you have to first let go. You can't take inhale after inhale after inhale. You eventually have to exhale. And you can't just keep letting things go. You're eventually going to have to inhale. So use that exhale as a reminder to release tension in your body. Okay, so when you're going through those 10 cycles of breath, every time you exhale, just notice. Go head to toe. Notice any tension you might be holding. Number four, if possible, figure out what steps to take to reduce your fear and tension. So it can be as simple as reviewing the steps above. You can also gather a group of supportive individuals, create a calming atmosphere around yourself, listening to soothing sounds or a guided meditation. One thing I would suggest highly are the steps above, because those three are portable. You can take them anywhere. Anywhere you are, you can ground into the body, you can take deep breaths, you can release tension. You may not have the time to call a group of your friends and be like, hey, do you guys have a few minutes to talk? You may not have You may not have the option to listening to soothing sounds or a guided meditation or getting tips, from a podcast. You might not have this at your fingertips when you're in a moment of urgency, like I gotta figure this out, right? You can always breathe. You can always ground. You can always release tension. So number 5, resisting fear will only increase it. I'm going to start that one more time because this cannot be repeated like too many times. Resisting fear will only increase it. Begin noticing the times your energy is invested in trying to stop what's happening. Begin noticing. We're just noticing. We're not getting mad that we can't fix it. We're not getting upset that we can't improve it. We're not angry that this is the way that we are. We're noticing. Okay? And if it helps, I want you to notice your behavior. Notice the way that you show up as if it's someone you love and adore. Oftentimes it's easier to do that than to look at ourselves through those eyes, okay? Allow what is happening to happen. Allow what is to be, and work on your relationship and judgment with it. That is always the best place to start. Notice expectations, assumptions, and keep coming back to the present moment as many times as you need to. As many times, my friends. Over and over and over and over again. For those of you that have meditated with me, you know that a great meditation is not defined by how quiet your mind is. Sometimes some of the best practices that I've had are the ones where my mind was pulling me in 19 different directions, and over the course of 15 minutes, I've had to call myself back gently to my breath, to the present moment, like 50, 60, 100 times. It's the practice that matters. It's the practice that matters. It's the fact that you're showing up at all to practice that matters. So if you have to keep doing it, good, do it. Just keep going. So now we're moving on to tension. Tension, as I stated before, is the bodily response to fear, anxiety, stress, suffering, pain, and all of the survival emotions. What is another way of saying what tension is the emotional response to fear. It's the emotional response to the fear that's going on in our mind. Okay? The body is a vehicle being driven by the mind. If your mind is on autopilot, the body becomes a victim of your reactions, your impulses, and your behavioral patterns. Break the pattern by tuning into it, accepting it's already happening, and work with what you're given in this moment. So here are a few things. I think there's like 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. There's 4. So here are 4 things that I offer you with tension. Now, some of them may coincide with fear, but again, I want to remind you, fear is of the mind, tension is of the body. Okay, so they're definitely going to coincide every now and then, but tension is more in your realm of not understanding, but practical application, right? We can't always go into our mind and just flip a switch. Sometimes going into our mind is like opening up social media for one thing, but we end up scrolling and we get distracted. The body, however, we can notice it. We can take a little more control of it. It's easier to drop our shoulders than to close a mental tab, right? So the first one is stop reacting and start paying attention to how fear or pain are showing up in the body. This is not a time for judgment, but rather complete observation of what is. Stay tuned into the physical feelings that are present with you now, not in the thinking mind. Because remember, our body doesn't understand the difference between past, present, future. So if you're thinking about something that your boss or your coworker or a family member or your partner said to you that really pissed you off, but it was like a month ago, your body doesn't understand you're thinking about it a month ago. It just understands you're experiencing it now. So we want to try to get out of our thinking mind and into our body and just be present with what's going on with it right now. Okay. Tension is tightness. This is number 2. Tension is tightness. The opposite is release or allowance. So bring a sense of ease and gentleness through the body, like a wave of tranquility washing over you. Keep releasing tension. The tension in your muscles, the tension anywhere you feel it. Keep releasing it as many times as you need to. And remember, this is a cycle that you're observing and then ultimately breaking. It won't be something you do one time. So that in itself could be a wonderful practice for this cycle. You may find yourself, with the narrative of, oh my God, how many times do I have to do this? Like, how many times do I have to tune into this? How many times? Just do it. Just do it. No one said, not one person is telling you, please, if they are, they're lying to you. No one's telling you this is going to be easy. No one's telling you this is going to be simple or a one-time thing. I will be the first to tell you this is something you keep showing up for. Okay? So if there's a narrative in your head telling you it should be easy, the first practice you should start with is breaking that narrative. So number 3, loosen up physically, loosen up. And identify what emotional states and patterns are showing up for you. See if you can separate the thoughts from the emotions and then from how they show up in the body. Detaching from the experience allows the intensity to decrease. So a very quick example of this, which I believe I have a podcast on, but I can't remember the title. A very quick example of this is, okay, we talked about narratives. Let's stick with anxiety. The narrative is, I am an anxious person, right? It shows up in the emotion of anxiety, worry, fear. And then how does it show up in the body? See how all those are different? There's a story, there's a physical sensation, how it shows up in the body, and then there's the label of it. See if you can separate all 3 of those. That's the best way that I can explain that. And this may be something that you literally have to write down on paper. That might be a practice that you carve out the time to do, maybe once a week. Okay. And then the last one. Bring your awareness to the experience you give yourself. Hold on, I think I typed this wrong. Okay. Once you bring awareness to the experience, you give yourself the option to choose a response rather than defaulting to an emotional reaction. Like I've been saying this whole class and basically every teaching that I ever share, awareness is where it starts. Once you become aware, then your options open up. When you become aware, you're one step closer to allowing, okay? So a simple example that I gave is a reaction is clenching your jaw. We all do it, consciously, unconsciously. Most of the time it's unconscious, but we all do it. A choice, once you become aware, my jaw is clenched. What's a choice you can make? You can unclench it. It's truly that simple. It's truly that simple. That's how you take your power back. You decide to. You can also take a deep breath and it'll probably unclench by itself. But if you didn't notice that it was clenched, then you wouldn't have had the choice to unclench it. See what I'm saying? So just simply by noticing, by observing, and leaving no room for judgment. There's just no room for it, because then if you start judging yourself, you're not thinking about your choice. You're thinking about all the things you, quote, should have done, right? And so last, let's move on to pain. So I have 5 questions for pain that I want to offer you. But let me reiterate, pain has a great deal to do with your belief system, which will ultimately become a deep dive into your mindset and the truths that you accept. So hear how I'm saying that. I put a lot of responsibility on you. Maybe you didn't get these belief systems on your own. Maybe it was your childhood, your environment, whatever the case may be. You are responsible for creating that change in your reality, though. So if that's triggering, or you're just not in a place to, hear that or be with that or hold that responsibility. That's cool. Stick with fear and tension. There's plenty there to get you started. But when it comes to pain, with that in mind, let me continue what I'm saying. With that in mind, some of these practices may not be helpful if you're closed-minded or already in the experience of intense pain. That's okay. Start with where you are and start with what you have. Okay? Oh, it's getting dark. All right, I'm almost done. I just like noticed how dark it is on my screen now. So once you've, quote, treated the fear of the mind and the tension of the body, so once you've like practiced all of those things and you feel like you're working from a calm place, start asking yourself these self-discovery questions and get to know your relationship with pain. I highly recommend doing this when you're calm, when you're grounded, not in the midst of stress. Because sometimes when we ask, no, not sometimes, every time we ask our mind a question, it will give us an answer. If we're asking from a place of calm, then our intention is calm. If we're asking from a place of stress, then our intention is stressed. And so a simple question like, let's see, how am I judging the pain I have? If you ask that from a calm place, you're going to get a calm answer. If you ask that from a stressful place, how am I judging the pain I have? You're going to start judging yourself. Maybe you won't. Maybe you won't. But I highly suggest coming from a place of groundedness, of focus, of presence, and calm and ease in your body. So number one, what are a few labels attached to pain? So what labels have you attached to the word pain? And think about that. Where do these labels stem from? How am I judging the pain I have or have yet to experience? How am I judging it? A judgment can be as simple as good, bad, I deserve it, I don't deserve it. It could be a judgment of worthiness, of enoughness. Judgments are the stories and the labels that we place over what is already happening, okay? So they're not fact. Remember that, they're not fact. Just like everything you think is not fact. They're stories. Keep that in mind. In what ways are those judgments impacting my life, experience, or perspective? Or all three? In what ways are those judgments impacting my life, experience, or perspective? And finally, what is one strong belief I have toward pain and my ability to experience it? That's a big one. What is one strong belief I have toward pain and my ability to experience it? Okay, my friends, I went well over the time that I wanted to. So that's a good practice. See if I can get that down like 30 minutes next time. But thank you so much for checking out the Elevate Your Energy Summer Series. I am so excited to bring this stuff to you. And if you received this, if you were on the other end of this and you got to the end, reach out to me. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what your experience of this is. This is not a class that I'm just giving away. This is something that you have to opt in for. So I know there's a particular set of people watching this, and I know you're my people. So I want to hear where you're at. I want to hear what your experience is. If any of this resonated with you, what was challenging, what did you love? And if you're interested in any more classes. So thank you so much. And until the next session, peace and blessings, friend.